Hello friends, welcome to our Rockstar Virat Power YouTube channel. In this video, we are going to learn about Anglo Norman literature. In this, we had made a previous video series on this English literature. If you have not seen the previous videos, you have to see it firstly so that you can understand the link between these chapters. So, in today's session, we are going to learn about Anglo Norman literature and that influence on our English literature. So, Anglo Norman literature is a literature composed in Anglo Norman language. You have to know about what is that the Anglo Norman. The Anglo Norman refers to the period from Norman conquest and up to inaugurated a distinctly new epoch where the clergy insisted on the use of Latin and the nobility on the use of French chronicles. Religious and didactic writing, poetry and drama were the popular forms of this Anglo-Norman literature. See, this literature is from 1066 to 1204 when the Duchy of Normandy and the Kingdom of England were united in Anglo-Norman realm. Then see, the Norman language was introduced to England during the rule of William the Conqueror. Following the Norman conquest, the Norman language became the language of English nobility. During whole 20th century, then Anglo-Norman language, the variety of Norman used in England was similar to Latin in the distinction of being literary language of England and it was use of the court until the 14th century. बघा 14व्या सेंचुरीपर्यंत याचा वापर करण्यात आला आणि हा एक पिरियड आहे जो की अँग्लो सॅक्सन जे की आपण ओल्ड इंग्लिश लिटरेचरचा अभ्यास करतोय तर ओल्ड इंग्लिश लिटरेचरमध्ये आपण अगोदर अँग्लो सॅक्सनचा अभ्यास केलेला आहे त्यानंतर आपण या भागामध्ये अँग्लो नॉर्मन या पिरियडचा अभ्यास करतोय आणि यामध्ये येत असलेले जे डिफरंट पोएट्री प्रोज आहेत याबद्दल सुद्धा आपण अभ्यास करणार आहोत या पार्टमध्ये. The Anglo-Norman period, the term Anglo-Norman is generally used to describe the period of English history from the Norman conquest to the middle of 14th century. See, then it was called as because non-Latin literature is of that time was written in Anglo-Norman. Which type of it is written in that Anglo-Norman. See. Anglo-Norman, the French dialect spoken by the Norman invaders. Which dialects is spoken by them? The French dialect. Okay. Then see, the Norman were pagan barbarian periods and the Denmark, Norway and Iceland who began to make destructive plundering raids on European coastal settlements in the 8th century. So, see, Norman conquest is the military conquest of England of William Duke of Normandy, primarily effected by his decisive victory at the Battle of Hastings, and in which in October 14, 1066 and resulting ultimately in profound political, administrative and social changes in British Isles. Then see, invasion of England. What is that invasion of England? The conquest was the final act of the complicated drama that had begun years earlier in the region of Edward the Confessor. Then last king of Anglo-Saxon royal line is Edward, who had almost certainly designed William and his successor in 1051 was involved a childless marriage and used his lack of an heir as diplomatic tool, promising the throne to different parties throughout his region, then including Harold Godwinson, later Harold II, and the power of Earl Wessex, the exiled Tostige, who is the Harold's brother, and Harold III Herode king of Norway, also had designed to the throne and threatened invasions. In this way, we have learned about invasion of England. Then, amid with welfare and conflicting claims, Edward from the deathbed named Harold his successor of January 5, 1066, and Harold was crowned king in the following day. However, Harold's position was compromising according to the Beox tapestry and Norman sources. Because of 1064, he had sworn in an oath in William's presence to defend William's rights to the throne. These are some points regarding their how the kings were ruling and how what are the points happening at that points, like from almost the beginning of the reign, Harold faced challenges to his authority, and Tostig began riding to the southern and eastern coast in England in May. Eventually joined forces with Harold III. Harold was able to keep his militia on guard throughout the summer but dismissed it early in September when he ran out supplies and his peasant soldiers needed to return to their fields for their harvest. In this way, we have learned about the Norman conquest of England. But this, because of this Norman conquest of England, various impacts happened on the literature also. What are that impacts happened? Like Norman conquest radically changed English culture and law, language and character. It enhances effect. It gives effect for English culture, then law and then character also. Then what happened? The Norman conquest brought to power in French-speaking ruling class. French became the language of law and Old English became confined to the lower classes. You have to remember this point because in previous year the question is asked, so that you have to remind that the Norman conquest brought a power of French. The French language is speaking by a ruling class or upper classes, and the English language is spoken by lower classes. French became language of law, ruling and upper classes were talking, and English confined to the lower classes. So you have to learn this, you have to understand and remember this point so that you can give the answer of this question. The Norman conquest fundamentally altered social, legal and political relations by introducing a new feudal system, and the society became hierarched and king became a supreme ruler and all came into the possessions. Then this new feudal system created a network of territorial relationship between members of warrior aristocracy, and the king granted a fief to his tenants in chief of vassals who granted suffrages to their vassals, and each level in the feudal system has to pay for the land and protection, and that the higher classes offered fealty thus became central to this system of feudalism. See, there are various points given in these points, but we are focusing in the way for preparation of setnet. So we are going to learn first most important point, then we will go in detail knowledge. See, influence of the Norman conquest on English language, what the influence had. See, the Norman conquest changed the whole course of English language, and French became the language of social prestige of status, and French words entered into the lexicon. More than 10,000 French words found a way into the English literature, and English gradually disappeared as a written language. English gradually was disappearing as a form of written language and resulted to the removal of restraints or development of language. Grammar became simplified as people started finding the simplest way to communicate with people who did not speak English as their first language. The pronunciation of English changed to some extent and the influence of the French. In this way, there are various points like influencing because of French dialect and various Norman conquest. That's why we have learned about this. In our next video, we are going to learn about literature of the Anglo Norman period. So, till then, see you soon.